I came home from work on a Tuesday afternoon in late September to find my grandmother's century-old boxwood hedge reduced to jagged stumps and scattered branches across my front lawn in Greenville, South Carolina. My hands started shaking as I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at what used to be a magnificent 12-foot wall of living history that had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and Hurricane Hugo. Now it looked like someone had taken a chainsaw to it in a blind rage. My name is Frederick Oakes, and I had inherited this 1920s craftsman house from my grandmother 3 years ago. That hedge had been her pride and joy, planted by her own grandmother in 1925 when the house was first built. The boxwoods had grown dense and full over the decades, creating a natural privacy screen between my property and the street. Neighbors would stop to admire it during their evening walks. A local garden club had even featured it in their annual tour last spring. I walked closer, my work shoes crunching on the scattered leaves and branches. The cuts were fresh, oozing sap. Whoever did this had been here within the last few hours. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures, documenting every angle of the destruction. That is when I noticed a business card stuck to my front door with tape. Courtesy landscape maintenance performed by Willow Creek HOA, approved contractor. For questions, contact Donna Reynolds, HOA president. My blood ran cold. Donna. Of course it was Donna Reynolds. The woman had been harassing me about my hedge for the past 6 months, ever since she was elected president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. She had sent me 3 letters claiming the hedge violated some obscure bylaw about visual obstruction and uniform neighborhood aesthetics. I had ignored them because my property deed predated the HOA by 70 years. When the neighborhood was developed in the 1980s, my grandmother's house was already there, grandfathered in. We were not even technically part of the HOA. I called Donna immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring with her usual saccharine tone. Donna Reynolds speaking. Donna, this is Frederick Oakes. Your landscape crew just destroyed my hedge, my 100-year-old hedge that you had absolutely no right to touch. There was a pause, then a little laugh that made my jaw clench. Oh, Frederick, I am glad you got our notice. The board voted unanimously last week to enforce the landscape standards across all properties in the neighborhood boundary. Your hedge was blocking sightlines, and frankly, it was becoming an eyesore, all overgrown and scraggly looking. Donna, I am not part of your HOA. My property was here first. You cannot just come onto my land and destroy my property. Actually, Frederick, if you check the new neighborhood bylaws we had approved by the county in July, all properties within the Willow Creek boundaries are now subject to HOA regulations, regardless of when they were built. We sent everyone notification. It is all perfectly legal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Delete your bylaws. They do not override property rights. You just committed criminal trespass and destruction of property. I am calling the police. You go right ahead, honey. We have all the proper documentation. Maybe next time you will respond to official HOA correspondence instead of ignoring it. Have a blessed day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there on my porch, phone in hand, looking at the carnage in my yard. Some of those boxwood plants were older than my father would have been. They were irreplaceable, and Donna Reynolds had just had them hacked down like they were weeds. I called the Greenville Police Department non-emergency line and explained the situation. An officer arrived about 40 minutes later, a middle-aged guy named Officer Patterson who looked tired and like he had heard every ridiculous complaint imaginable. He took notes while I showed him the destruction and explained the history. So you were saying you are not part of the HOA? He asked, writing on his pad. Correct. My property deed predates the HOA by decades. I have all the documentation inside if you need to see it. And they just came and cut down your hedge without permission? Yes, that business card was on my door when I got home. I showed him the card. Officer Patterson sighed. Mr. Oakes, this sounds like a civil matter. Property dispute between you and your HOA. You will probably need to take them to court. They trespassed on my property and destroyed something worth thousands of dollars. How is that not criminal? Did you have no trespassing signs posted? No, but was your property fenced or clearly marked private? It is my front yard. It is obviously private property. He gave me a sympathetic look. I understand your frustration, sir. But But without clear signage and with the HOA claiming they have legal authority, this becomes a he said, she said civil dispute. You need to document everything, get estimates for damages, and probably hire a lawyer. I can write up a report for your records, but I cannot arrest anyone for this. I wanted to argue, but I could see it was pointless. He was right that this would end up in court. He took down all the information, gave me a case number, and left. I spent the next hour cleaning up the branches and debris, piling them in my backyard. Every piece I picked up made me angrier. That evening, I called my friend Marcus, who was a real estate attorney in Charleston. We had gone to Clemson together and stayed close over the years. He listened to the whole story without interrupting. "Fred, they screwed up big time," he said when I finished. "Even if they somehow got the county to approve new bylaws, they cannot override your grandfathered property rights. And they definitely cannot just destroy mature landscaping without your permission. Those boxwoods you are describing, if they are really 100 years old, they are worth a fortune." How much are we talking? Mature boxwoods that size? You're looking at $1,500 to $3,000 per plant for replacement, and that is if you can even find them. A hedge that age is basically irreplaceable. You need to get an arborist out there, ASAP, to assess the damage and give you a detailed report. I am talking a certified arborist, not just a landscaper. Can you recommend someone? Yeah, call Anderson Tree Services in Greenville. Ask for Harold Porter. Tell him I sent you. He is the best arborist in the upstate, and his reports hold up in court. Get everything documented. Then we will sue the hell out of this HOA. The next morning, I called Anderson Tree Services first thing. Harold Porter agreed to come out that afternoon. I also called in sick to work, which was easy enough since I was a freelance software developer and set my own schedule. I spent the morning pulling out all my property documents, the HOA letters I'd received, and printing out every photo I had taken. Harold Porter arrived at 2 in the afternoon, driving a white truck with his company logo. He was a trim man in his 60s with sun-weathered skin and sharp blue eyes. He took one look at the stumps and let out a low whistle. "How old did you say these were?" "Planted in 1925. They have been here 100 years. He knelt down next to one of the larger stumps, running his hand over the cut surface. "These were English boxwoods, Buxus sempervirens. Look at the growth rings here." He pointed to the concentric circles in the wood. "This one is definitely close to a century old, and someone just hacked through them with what looks like a chainsaw, not even proper pruning cuts." He stood up, shaking his head. "This is vandalism, pure and simple. These plants were healthy, mature specimens. Do you have any idea what these were worth?" Marcus said maybe $1,500 to $3,000 per plant. "For mature boxwoods this size, in this condition? Try double that. A 100-year-old English boxwood that size would run you $3,000 to $6,000 per plant to replace, if you could even find them. And you had how many in this hedge?" I counted the stumps. 23 plants total." Harold pulled out a tablet and started making notes. "We are talking somewhere between $70,000 and $140,000 in damages just for the plants themselves. Then you have got labor costs for removal and replanting, soil amendment, establishment care, plus the loss of a historic specimen garden feature. Mr. Oakes, whoever did this, destroyed something truly irreplaceable." The number hit me like a punch to the gut, 6 figures, for a hedge. But as Harold walked me through his assessment, I started to understand. These were not just bushes, they were living antiques, carefully tended for a century. You could not just run to Home Depot and buy a replacement. "I will put together a complete arborist report with photos, measurements, and a detailed damage assessment," Harold said. "It will take me about a week, but I can tell you right now, whoever authorized this is in serious trouble. This was not just negligent. This was deliberate destruction of extremely valuable plant material. The HOA president claimed they had legal authority to do it. Not without going through proper channels, they did not. Even if they had legitimate concerns about the hedge, which I doubt, they would need to notify you, give you a chance to respond, probably take you to court first. You do not just show up with a chainsaw and hack down 100-year-old boxwoods. That is criminal destruction of property." After Harold left, I sat on my porch and tried to process everything. $140,000. Donna Reynolds had no idea what she had just done. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That evening, I got a text from my neighbor 3 doors down, Bill Markham. Bill was a retired engineer who had lived in the neighborhood since the 80s, long before Donna and her crew moved in. "Heard about your hedge. Donna has been bragging about it all afternoon. Says she's cleaning up the neighborhood. Thought you should know." I thanked Bill and asked if he would be willing to be a witness if this went to court. He agreed immediately. Apparently, Donna had been making a lot of enemies with her aggressive HOA enforcement lately. Over the next few days, I learned just how much Donna had been overreaching. She'd been fining people for leaving their trash cans visible from the street. She had tried to force someone to remove a basketball hoop from their driveway. She had sent threatening letters about holiday decorations being up too long after Christmas. The neighborhood was full of people who were fed up with her petty tyranny, but most of them just paid the fines and complied rather than fight. Nobody had really challenged her until now. Harold Porter sent me his report the following Wednesday. It was 37 pages long, with detailed photographs, measurements, historical documentation about English boxwoods, and a comprehensive damage assessment. His estimate came to $128,000 for the plants alone, plus another $20,000 for removal and replacement labor, soil remediation, and establishment care. Total damages, $148,000. I forwarded the report to Marcus immediately. He called me 5 minutes later. "Fred, this is gold. Harold documented everything perfectly. I've got a friend who practices in Greenville, Jennifer Walsh. She specializes in property law and HOA disputes. I'm sending her this report in your case. She will reach out to you tomorrow." Jennifer Walsh called me the next morning. She had a crisp, professional voice that made me feel better immediately. "Mr. Oakes, I've reviewed your case in the Arborist report. This is one of the most egregious cases of HOA overreach I have seen in my 15 years of practice. I would like to represent you in filing suit against the Willow Creek HOA and personally against Donna Reynolds for directing the destruction of your property." Personally against Donna? Yes. When an HOA officer acts outside their legal authority, they can be held personally liable for damages. In this case, Mrs. Reynolds clearly exceeded any reasonable interpretation of HOA authority. She ordered the destruction of property she had no legal right to touch. That makes her personally liable. We talked for another 30 minutes about strategy and costs. Jennifer worked on contingency for cases like this, meaning she would take a percentage of the settlement or judgment rather than charging me up front. Given the clear-cut nature of the case and the excellent documentation, she was confident we would win. "I'm going to draft a demand letter first," Jennifer explained. "We will lay out the damages and give them 30 days to respond before filing suit. Sometimes that's enough to bring them to the table. HOAs generally have insurance that covers this kind of thing, and their insurer will probably tell them to settle once they see Harold's report." The demand letter went out the next Monday. Jennifer sent me a copy. It was 8 pages of legal reasoning, documented evidence, and a demand for $160,000 in damages plus attorney fees. She had added the extra $12,000 for the loss of property value and emotional distress. Donna called me 2 days later. Her saccharine tone was gone. "Frederick, I just got a ridiculous letter from some lawyer claiming we owe you $160,000 for trimming an overgrown hedge. This is insane. You are not seriously pursuing this? Donna, your crew destroyed a 100-year-old hedge worth over $100,000. Yes, I am seriously pursuing this. It was just some bushes. You are acting like we knocked down your house. Those bushes were older than you and me combined. They were irreplaceable, and you had no legal right to touch them. The HOA has every right to maintain neighborhood standards. Not on my property, you do not. My deed predates your HOA. I was never part of it. You trespassed and destroyed my property. Now you're going to pay for it." There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. "I will talk to the board, but I am telling you right now, we are not paying some made-up number for a bunch of bushes. This is extortion. Then I will see you in court." She hung up. I actually felt calm for the first time since this whole thing started. The ball was in their court now. 3 days later, Jennifer called with an update. "I heard from the HOA's attorney. He is asking for an extension to review the claim. That is actually a good sign. It means they are taking it seriously. Did they say anything about the amount? He said it seems excessive, but he is reviewing the Arborist report. My guess is he is talking to their insurance company right now. Nobody wants to take this to trial. Over the next 2 weeks, I started getting interesting reactions from neighbors. Some people stopped me during my evening walks to express support. Others, the ones who were firmly in Donna's camp, gave me cold stares and crossed the street to avoid me. The neighborhood was splitting into factions. Bill Markham told me that Donna had called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my frivolous lawsuit and rally support. According to Bill, who attended the meeting, it did not go the way Donna planned. Half the room was on your side, Bill said. People are tired of her power trips. When she told everyone you were suing for over $100,000, some guy in the back asked if that was really what the hedge was worth. Donna tried to brush it off, but someone else had already looked up what mature boxwoods cost online. She could not explain why the HOA destroyed something that valuable without at least talking to you first. Did anyone ask about the legal authority issue? Oh yeah, Martha Henderson, you know her, the retired paralegal. She asked point blank whether the HOA's attorney had approved the action before they did it. Donna got all defensive and said they were enforcing approved bylaws. Martha said that did not answer the question. It got pretty heated. The story made me smile. Martha Henderson was sharp as a tack and did not suffer fools. If she was questioning Donna's authority, other people would follow. The extension period ended on a Friday in November. Jennifer called me that afternoon with news. Their attorney called. The insurance company reviewed the claim and they are willing to settle. My heart jumped. For how much? They're offering $75,000. I did the math quickly. That was less than half what we asked for. That seems low. It is low. We are rejecting it. I told him we will accept nothing less than $135,000 plus attorney fees. That is already a discount from the full claim. The ball is back in their court. What if they say no? Then we file suit. But I do not think they will. Their attorney knows they will lose at trial. Harold's report is airtight. They destroyed a 100-year-old hedge without legal authority. No judge is going to side with them. The waiting was excruciating. I tried to focus on work, but I found myself constantly checking my phone for updates. The weather was getting colder, and every time I looked at the stumps in my front yard, I felt a fresh wave of anger. I'd hired a landscaping company to at least dig out the stumps and level the ground, so it did not look quite so much like a war zone. But the absence of the hedge was stark. My house looked naked and exposed from the street. On Tuesday, Jennifer called again. They accepted. $135,000 plus $12,000 for attorney fees. Total settlement, $147,000. The HOA's insurance will cut the check within 30 days. I actually had to sit down. They really agreed to that? Their attorney is smart enough to know they had no choice. This was a slam dunk case for us. Plus, Donna apparently wanted to fight it, but the rest of the board overruled her. Nobody wanted this going to trial and becoming public record. What happens now? I will send you the settlement agreement to review and sign. Once both sides sign, the 30-day clock starts. The money will go into my firm's escrow account. I will take my fees and cut you a check for your portion. In about 6 weeks, this will all be over. And Donna? That is the interesting part. The settlement includes a stipulation that Donna Reynolds must resign as HOA president within 60 days and cannot hold any HOA office for at least 5 years. The board insisted on it as part of the deal. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Not only was I getting compensated for the hedge, but Donna was being removed from power. Did she agree to that? She did not have a choice. It was either that or risk personal liability if this went to trial. The insurance company made it clear they would fight any personal judgment she incurred separately. She would have been on the hook for damages herself. The settlement papers arrived via DocuSign that evening. I read through every page carefully. It was all there. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing, payment terms, the resignation requirement, and a mutual agreement not to disparage each other publicly. I signed it and sent it back. That weekend, I started researching replacement options for the hedge. Harold had been right that finding 100-year-old boxwoods was impossible, but there were some good alternatives. American boxwoods grew faster than English boxwoods and could create a similar effect within a few years. There was also the option of going with a mixed hedge of different evergreen species. I decided to wait until spring to make any decisions. The ground needed time to recover anyway. In early December, the HOA held another meeting to formally accept Donna's resignation and elect a new president. Bill Markham attended and gave me a full report. "Yo, it was actually pretty civil," he said. Donna gave a short statement about wanting to spend more time with family, the usual stuff. Nobody bought it, but nobody challenged her either. Then Martha Henderson got nominated for president and won by a landslide. First thing she did was propose a moratorium on all enforcement actions while the board reviews the bylaws, passed unanimously. Martha Henderson, as HOA president, was like night and day from Donna. Within 2 weeks, she had sent a letter to every homeowner apologizing for overreach by the previous administration and announcing a comprehensive review of all HOA rules and enforcement procedures. She also personally called me to apologize for what had happened. "What Donna did was inexcusable," Martha said on the phone. "I want you to know that the current board had no knowledge of her plans and would never have approved that action. We are reviewing everything to make sure nothing like this happens again." "I appreciate that, Martha, and congratulations on the election." "Thank you. I did not really want the job, but somebody has to clean up this mess. By the way, I've been looking into your property status. You are correct that you are grandfathered in and not subject to HOA authority. I am working with our attorney to update our records and make that crystal clear. You will not be getting any more enforcement letters." The check arrived 2 days before Christmas. Jennifer called to let me know it had cleared, and she was cutting my check for $124,500 after her fees. It showed up via courier the next day. I stood in my living room, holding the check and looking out the front window at where the hedge used to be. $124,000, enough to replace the hedge several times over, enough to cover the property value loss, enough to make this whole nightmare worth it, at least financially. But standing there, I realized the money was not really the point. The point was that Donna Reynolds had thought she could just do whatever she wanted because she had a little bit of power. She had thought she could ignore property rights and history and basic decency because she was the HOA president, and she had learned the hard way that actions have consequences. I deposited the check the day after Christmas. Then, I called Harold Porter to start planning the spring landscaping. We talked through options for almost an hour. In the end, I decided on a mixed hedge of American boxwoods interspersed with holly and cherry laurel. It would not be the same as grandmother's hedge, but it would be beautiful in its own way. Harold said he could source some fairly large specimens, 5 to 6 feet tall, so I would not be starting from scratch. It would cost about $30,000 for the plants and installation. "That will leave you with plenty left over," Harold noted. "I'm thinking about using some of it to set up a fund," I said. "Something to help other people who get bullied by HOAs, legal fees, expert witnesses, that kind of thing." Harold chuckled. "Your grandmother would be proud. She was always standing up for what was right." In January, I started getting calls from people in other neighborhoods who had heard about my case. Word had spread through local real estate circles about the 6-figure settlement for the destroyed hedge. Several people wanted advice on fighting their own HOA battles. I talked to as many as I could, sharing Jennifer's contact information and Harold's name. One guy, Robert Chen from a neighborhood in Simpsonville, had a similar situation where his HOA had removed a mature Japanese maple from his yard without permission. I walked him through the whole process, document everything, get a certified arborist report, find a good property lawyer. 6 months later, he settled his case for $42,000. Another woman, Patricia Flynn from Malden, was being fined by her HOA for having solar panels on her roof. South Carolina had a solar rights law that specifically protected homeowners' rights to install solar, but her HOA was ignoring it. I connected her with Jennifer, who sent one letter threatening to sue for attorney fees under the solar rights statute. The HOA backed down immediately and waived all the fines. In March, when the weather started warming up, Harold's crew came out to install the new hedge. They spent 3 days preparing the soil, amending it with compost and mycorrhizae to help the new plants establish. Then they brought in the new boxwoods, holly, and laurel. The plants were gorgeous, healthy specimens that must have been growing in a nursery for years. They planted them carefully, spacing them properly for mature growth. When they finished, I stood on the sidewalk and looked at my front yard. It was not the same as the 100-year-old hedge, nothing could replace that. But it was beautiful, and in a few years it would fill in and create that same sense of privacy and permanence that the old hedge had provided. It was a new beginning. Bill Markham came by while I was admiring the new plantings. "Looks great, Fred. Your grandmother would approve." "Thanks, Bill. It will never be what she had, but it is something." "Did you hear Donna put her house on the market?" I turned to look at him. "Really?" "Yeah, listed it last week. I heard from someone who knows her daughter that she could not handle being in the neighborhood after everything that happened. Too embarrassing." I felt a complicated mix of emotions about that. Part of me was glad she was facing consequences for her actions. Part of me almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Where's she moving?" "Somewhere in North Carolina, I think. Her daughter lives up there." Martha Henderson called me a few days later with more news. "I wanted to let you know that we have officially removed your property from the HOA jurisdiction in our records. You will not be receiving any more correspondence from us about rules or fees. Also, we voted to dissolve the architectural review committee that Donna had created. Too much opportunity for abuse. From now on, any major enforcement decisions have to be approved by the full board with proper notice and due process." That sounds like a much better system. It is what we should have been doing all along. I also wanted to thank you, Frederick. What you did, standing up to Donna, it forced all of us to take a hard look at how this HOA was being run. We were letting her get away with too much because nobody wanted to deal with the conflict. You made us deal with it. After she hung up, I thought about what she said. I had not set out to reform the HOA or take down Donna Reynolds. I just wanted to protect my property and my grandmother's legacy. But sometimes standing up for yourself has ripple effects you do not expect. In April, I used $20,000 from the settlement to set up a fund through a local legal aid nonprofit. They would use it to help people fighting HOA abuses, particularly low-income homeowners who could not afford attorneys. Jennifer agreed to provide pro bono consultations for people referred through the fund. Harold offered discounted rates for arborist reports needed for legal cases. The local paper did a story about the fund in May. They did not mention Donna by name, but anyone who followed neighborhood gossip knew what it was about. The headline read, "Local man creates fund to help homeowners fight HOA, overreach after winning six-figure settlement." The reporter interviewed me in my front yard with the new hedge visible in the background. "What do you want people to know about HOA disputes?" she asked. "That you have rights," I said. "HOAs have legitimate purposes, but they are not above the law. If they overstep, document everything, get expert opinions, and do not be afraid to fight back. A lot of times, they are counting on people just rolling over and accepting whatever they do. Do not give them that satisfaction." What would you say to someone facing a similar situation? Get a good lawyer and a good expert witness, whatever kind of expert your case needs. In my case, it was an arborist. In someone else's case, it might be a structural engineer or an environmental consultant. Document everything, take photos, save every letter and email, and most importantly, know your rights. Your property is your property. An HOA does not get to just do whatever they want. The story ran the next Sunday and got picked up by a few regional news sites. I got emails and calls for weeks from people sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for advice. I helped as many as I could. By June, my new hedge was filling in beautifully. The plants had established well and were putting out new growth. It made me happy every time I came home and saw green where there had been stumps. The neighborhood felt more settled too, under Martha's leadership. People were actually talking to each other again instead of being suspicious and defensive. I ran into Donna one more time before she moved. It was at the grocery store in early July. We both froze when we saw each other in the produce section. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then Donna spoke, her voice quiet and strained. "I hope you are happy. You got your money and I lost everything." I could have said a lot of things. I could have pointed out that she had brought it all on herself. I could have told her about the people who were grateful that she was gone. But standing there looking at her, I just felt tired. "I did not want any of this, Donna. I just wanted you to leave my hedge alone." It was just bushes, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. No, it was my grandmother's legacy. It was 100 years of history. And you destroyed it because you could not stand that there was something in this neighborhood you did not control. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Her eyes were red. After a moment, she turned and walked away, leaving her shopping cart behind. I did not feel victorious watching her go. I just felt sad that it had come to this. Sad that someone could be so blinded by a little bit of authority that they would destroy something irreplaceable. Sad that she could not just admit she had been wrong and apologize. But that was not my problem anymore. I finished my shopping and went home to my house, my property, my new hedge that was growing strong and healthy in the Carolina sun. That summer, I spent a lot of time in my front yard, tending the new plants and making sure they were thriving. Neighbors would stop to chat and admire the landscaping. Bill Markham brought me tomatoes from his garden. Martha Henderson invited me to a neighborhood cookout, where, for the first time in years, people actually seemed to be enjoying themselves instead of worrying about HOA violations. In August, I got a letter from the legal aid nonprofit. They had used the fund to help 3 families successfully fight HOA disputes. One case involved a disabled veteran who was being fined for having a wheelchair ramp installed. Another involved a family being told to remove a swing set from their backyard. The third was a couple facing foreclosure over unpaid HOA fees that they did not actually owe. All 3 cases were resolved in favor of the homeowners. I kept that letter on my refrigerator. It reminded me that sometimes bad things lead to good outcomes. Donna's destruction of my hedge had hurt me, had cost her everything, and had torn the neighborhood apart for a while. But it had also led to reform, to people standing up for their rights, to an HOA that actually served homeowners instead of bullying them. In September, a year after the hedge was destroyed, Harold Porter stopped by to check on the plants. He walked around the hedge slowly, examining each plant carefully. "They are doing beautifully," he said finally. "You have been taking good care of them. In another 2 years, you will barely be able to tell this is new growth. It will look like it has been here forever." "It will never be what my grandmother had." "No," Harold agreed, "but it is what you have, and you made it happen. That counts for something." After he left, I sat on my porch and thought about what he said. He was right. I could not bring back the 100-year-old boxwoods. I could not undo what Donna had done. But I had fought back, won, and used that victory to help others. And I had created something new and beautiful out of the destruction. The legal settlement had been finalized. Donna was gone. The HOA was reformed, and my yard was healing. It was not the ending I would have chosen a year ago, but it was a good ending nonetheless. In October, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a note from an elderly woman named Grace Thompson who lived 3 neighborhoods over. She had read about my case and wanted to share something with me. "Dear Mr. Oakes," the note read, "I'm 92 years old and I knew your grandmother. We were in garden club together for 30 years. I'm sorry about what happened to her beautiful boxwoods. She loved that hedge so much. I thought you might like to have this." Inside the package was a photograph from the 1980s showing my grandmother standing in front of the hedge in full bloom. She was smiling, wearing gardening gloves and holding pruning shears. The hedge behind her was magnificent, full and green and perfectly shaped. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Margaret Oakes, 1987, Best Landscape Award." I had that photo framed and hung it in my living room where I could see it every day. It reminded me why the hedge mattered, why I had fought so hard, and what I was trying to honor with the new plantings outside. In November, Martha Henderson announced that the HOA was canceling the annual dues increase that Donna had pushed through the previous year. She also proposed using part of the HOA reserve fund to install better lighting in the neighborhood park. It passed unanimously. People were starting to see that an HOA could actually be a positive force instead of just a source of fines and harassment. Bill Markham told me at Thanksgiving that property values in the neighborhood had actually gone up in the past year, despite all the drama. "People want to live in neighborhoods with reasonable HOAs," he explained. "Word got around that Willow Creek cleaned house and things are better now. Young families are moving in." By December, my hedge was dormant for winter, but it had grown at least a foot over the summer. The plants were healthy and strong. In spring, they would put out new growth again, getting fuller and taller. Give it 5 years and it would be a real privacy screen. Give it 20 and it would be something special. Maybe in 100 years, someone would stand where I was standing and think about the hedge as a historic feature worth protecting. That was the thing about living plants. They existed in deep time. My grandmother had planted those original boxwoods thinking about the future, about how they would grow and mature over decades. Donna had destroyed them, thinking only about her own power and control in the moment. I was replanting now, thinking about the future again, about how these new plants would grow and what they would mean to whoever owned this house in 50 or 75 or 100 years. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my porch as midnight approached and looked at my front yard. The new hedge was just visible in the moonlight, the evergreen leaves dark against the winter grass. Somewhere 3 states away, Donna Reynolds was starting over in a new place, trying to put this whole disaster behind her. The legal fund was helping families fight back against HOA overreach. Martha Henderson was running the Willow Creek HOA with common sense and restraint. And my grandmother's house, the house she had loved and cared for, still stood with its new hedge growing strong. The clock struck midnight, and fireworks started going off around the neighborhood. I raised my glass of whiskey to the hedge, to my grandmother, to everyone who stands up for what is right even when it is hard. "Happy New Year," I said to the empty yard. "Here is to new growth." The hedge did not answer, of course. It just stood there being green and alive, doing what plants do best, growing slowly, patiently toward the light. And that was enough.